In 1964, a man was cutting a drainage ditch through a Wisconsin farm field when his machine hit something solid and threw him off his seat. What he had struck was the thigh bone of a woolly mammoth. The bones went to the local museum. They were put on a shelf, and they sat there for 28 years before anybody noticed that somebody had cut them with a knife. The field belongs to a place called Paris Township in Kenosha County, in the far southeastern corner of Wisconsin. It is about an hour north of Chicago. Flat farmland, drainage ditches, corn. The farmer was Frank Schaefer, and in 1964 he simply wanted the field to drain better. The contractor he hired was laying tile, which is a routine agricultural job, right up until the moment the machine stops dead and the operator ends up on the ground. They dug around a bit and found tusk fragments. A local amateur archaeologist named Phil Sander came out and did something that turned out to matter enormously. He drew a careful map of exactly where everything was. Schaefer donated the bones to the Kenosha Public Museum. They went into the collection, and that was the end of the story for nearly 3 decades. Nobody was hiding anything. Nobody was arguing about anything. A mammoth in Wisconsin is interesting, but it is not extraordinary. The ice sheets came down this far. The animals lived here. Occasionally a farmer finds one. The thing that made this different was sitting in a museum basement, unread, for 28 years. In the early 1990s, Dan Joyce, the museum's director, was going through mammoth and mastodon material in storage, cataloguing housekeeping, essentially. And on the bones, he saw marks, not scratches, not cracks, gashes cut into the bone, with the particular V-shaped profile that a stone edge leaves when it is drawn across bone with force. That shape is not something the ground produces. It is a signature. Somebody had butchered this animal, so in 1991 Joyce went looking for the field. And this is where Phil Sanders' map earns its place in the story, because 27 years of ploughing had erased every surface trace of the 1964 dig. Without that sketch, the site was simply gone. With it they found the spot. The excavation ran through 1992 and 1993, run by the Kenosha Public Museum with the Great Lakes Archaeological Research Centre, and it took roughly 18 months of extremely careful work. Under about 2.5 feet of soil, they found an adult male mammoth, around 75 to 80% of him. 11 feet at the shoulder, an estimated 7 tons. He had died at the edge of a lake left behind by melting glacial ice, and that is the reason any of this survived. The bones were sealed in pond clay, wet and airless, which is close to ideal for preservation. The site preserved mammoth footprints in the silt. The skeleton was disarticulated, not scattered the way scavengers scatter a carcass, but taken apart and sorted with bones stacked in groups. And tucked underneath the pelvis were 2 pieces of worked chert. And then the dating came back at around 13,000 years, and everybody relaxed because 13,000 is a Clovis number. Clovis hunters killing a mammoth in Wisconsin is a good find. It is not a problem. The following year, the bones were dated again, using a more refined method that purifies the collagen protein before measuring it. Cleaner sample, better number, 14,500 years. I find that moment quietly delightful, and I want to be clear about why. Nobody at that site was hunting for a controversy. They ran a better test because a better test existed, which is simply what you are supposed to do, and the better test handed them something they had not asked for and could not put back. While the Schaefer excavation was underway, Frank Schaefer's neighbour came over to have a word. His name was John Hebior, and he mentioned that some years earlier he had turned up a large bone on his own land about a mile away. He had not thought much of it. In 1994, a team led by David Overstreet of Marquette University went and dug it. What came out of that field is, by a comfortable margin, the most complete mammoth ever excavated in North America. 90% of the animal. And it had been butchered too. Cut marks on the neck, on the 4 feet, on the hind feet, on the forearm. 16 of them, distributed across 9 of the 194 bones recovered, which is not a pattern you get from an animal falling over. But the Hebior mammoth gave up something the Schaefer site did not. Tools. 4 of them lying with the bones. 2 chert biface knives, a sharp flake and a chopper made of dollar stone. Not a single ambiguous flake. A kit. And when the Hebior bones were dated, they came in slightly older than Schaefer, around 14,700 years. So now you have 2 mammoths on 2 adjoining farms, both taken apart with stone tools, both older than the people who were supposed to have arrived first, one of them with the actual knives still lying in the mud beside it. Here is what I keep circling back to about this site, and it is not the dates. Almost every argument in early American archaeology comes down to the same standoff. Somebody finds a broken stone and says a person made it, and somebody else says nature made it. And there is no way to settle it because both processes can produce the same object. That fight has consumed entire careers. Wisconsin sidesteps the whole thing. Nature does not cut a groove into a mammoth's neck vertebra. Nature does not disarticulate an animal and stack the pieces. And nature has no reason whatsoever to leave 2 napped chert knives and a stone chopper underneath the carcass. There is no geofact argument available here because the evidence is not a rock that might be a tool. It is a set of tools and an animal that has been dismantled, which is why Schaefer and Hebior sit in a genuinely unusual position. They are cited routinely as some of the better supported pre-Clovis evidence in North America. There is a marker on the roadside. The Hebior mammoth is on display at the Milwaukee Public Museum and the Schaefer mammoth at Kenosha. That said, I'm not going to tell you the argument is finished because it is not. There is published work arguing that the case for pre-Clovis occupation in eastern North America is weaker than it is usually presented, and Wisconsin gets swept up in that. The specific questions are about how firmly the tools are associated with the bones, and whether the dated material is dating the butchery or just the animal. Those are fair questions. They are also, and this is the important part, much narrower questions than the ones asked at almost every other site of this kind. Nobody is arguing about whether the knives are knives. And there is a detail I cannot get out of my head. The Hebior mammoth, the more complete of the two, with the better tools, sat in a Wisconsin farm field for roughly 14,700 years and then waited a few extra decades because a farmer found a bone, thought it was probably nothing and got on with his day. He only mentioned it because the neighbours happened to be digging, somewhere out there, in a shed, in a barn, under a field that nobody has any reason to disturb. That conversation has not happened yet. There are more fields like this than anyone has counted. Subscribe and I will keep finding them. Thanks for watching.